So today on the Nexus of Narratives, I am so grateful to share with you a conversation that I had with my dear friend, Deanna. She wears and juggles many hats and roles, and I think her conversation was a beautiful example of how sometimes we're not aware of how we show up into spaces and the power that our words hold in how we impact others and how we impact ourselves. And it's really a beautiful story about self-compassion and how that can trickle out into creating a better world. Hi, I'm Gabriella Richardson, and I am a lover of learning. I am a cultivator of community, and I am a seeker of belonging.
Everybody has a story to contribute that will hopefully help somebody else in a similar position.
Compassion is at the heart of it all.
Mm-hmm. I am a messy and imperfect human, just trying to do my best to make this world a little bit of a better place.
And the compassionate heart and mind is how we start to heal as a people and find common ground.
Feels like there's a lot of power there.
So I look forward to you joining me in that pursuit on the Nexus of Narratives.
What a beautiful thing this turned into. So, hello, my dear, dear friend, Deanna, who I love so dearly.
Hi.
And I am so grateful to know you. We've danced together for years. And I think I told you when I was pregnant and a few weeks out from delivering my daughter, and I was not in a great space, just like physically, I was so out of it. I was uncomfortable. Like it was a hot day. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I always knew when I met you that you're going to be an important person in my world. And I never quite knew how that would pan out. And I still think there's so much more to what our relationship will become and our friendship will become. And I think this is just one of those moments to validate that feeling that I had of what incredible role you would play in my life. So thank you so much for being here. And I think one of the things that's been so magical about space that we've shared together is that it's always been so open and so loving and so welcoming and so celebratory. And I'm so grateful to have shared that space with you. And so I hope we can emulate that here too.
Me too. We have a lot of fun together.
Yes, we do. We do. And so, you know, I know you as a just incredible human, as a phenomenal dancer who I just love sharing space with and playing with and connecting with, and, you know, even like having a gig with, being on stage with. And then now more recently, like really seeing the true genius of you as you show up in a professional space to have ideas and execute them. And a piece that I connect with to say like, yeah, we can be creative and fun and playful, but then also like get stuff done and be intelligent, and that all can coexist in a human. And like, you are the embodiment of that.
Wow. Thank you.
So like, you wear many hats. So if you were to run into a person and I didn't know you and you were to be like, hi, I'm Deanna, like, this is who I am, just like really quick, what would you say?
So I laugh because, it's actually like an identity crisis to a certain degree, because I have so many hats that I've recognized, especially recently, that I'm kind of like, I don't know what to lead with. You know, like there's so many different chapters of my life and dimensions to the work that I do in the world and the way I show up in the world in a non-professional way. I think the hat that I'm leaning into the most right now is as a VP with a company called NABA. And NABA stands for the Natural Art of Being Alive, which is just a gorgeous title for anything. You know, there's so much to lean into with that name. So I'm really proud of that hat in particular, to be able to work with NABA. in course development and community building. But outside of that, I do wear the hats of an energy healer, an herbalist, a nutritionist, a doula, a mama, a dancer, so I guess it's kind of like, it depends on the context of what I'm going to lead with. But I get to wear all of these hats that are so exciting and empowering. And I realize when I look at all the different hats, the thing that's a common thread is that my work in the world is to help people find the spark that's inside of them and to really call that out and call it forward so that they feel alive and empowered, and they see their value and they feel it and they express it in the world, so that we have more of that happening.
Which
more
so desperately need.
Everyone's authentic expression of who they are. That's the delight that I have in my roles in the world, whether it's in dance class, we do that for each other there, or whether it's professional, or whether it's as a mama.
Yeah. And I'd say you're pretty darn good at it. So then with that, like, let's dig into, why you're here, aside from, me calling you and being like, hey, can you come by in a few days? Can you come by in like 30 minutes, actually?
Sure. Let's do it.
Being an incredibly supportive friend, you helped with some of the back end pieces of my, creative. How am I going to support folks who want to come in and share their story? And then when I called, I was like, hey, Deanna, do you want to come and share your story too? You're like, oh, I was actually thinking about this. So
I couldn't help but think about it, because we talked about the meditation that you created to help people find this story within them. So it obviously couldn't help but cause a reflection inside me. So as I was working with that meditation that you created, I really went into it thinking like, gosh, I would have no idea what story I would tell. If you put me on the spot and just said, hey, come sit on this couch with me and let's chat, I would have felt like a blank slate. But working with you on that piece of the project, it stirred a memory that I hadn't actually thought about for a while, but it was a big deal for a while when it happened. And then of course it's been unraveling, and I can reflect back on ways that it's impacted me over the years. So the story that came to mind, I have a son, he'll be 11 this summer. So this happened about 10 years ago. My son was not quite 1. And we were at like an apartment building swimming pool, hanging out with another couple and their baby. So we had met this couple through our midwife. Our children were just a few weeks apart. And we're hanging out in the pool. Our children are splashing around, playing. And my friend and I were talking kind of about like the process of postpartum and just feeling into our bodies and feeling like, how everything is different. And that postpartum, I can speak kind of as a doula in this moment now. I wasn't a doula then, so I have a different perspective on it now, but it goes for a long time. And for a lot of women, that feeling of being different in your body, different in your mind, and obviously your heart and your spirit, extends for quite a while. So the context of the conversation that she and I were having was like not feeling quite like my body yet, not feeling quite... I hesitate to use the word strength, but that's the word that's coming to mind, of like the strength of my body was different. My kiddo didn't sleep well for the first year of life, so I was really sleep deprived. And that has an impact on everything. So we're talking about this. And in the course of this conversation, I used a phrase, and that's the focal point of our conversation here. So I think I was talking about, just like the way I was trying to exercise or get my strength back. And I used the phrase girl push-ups, like in context of, like I'm struggling to do girl push-ups. And my friend didn't miss a beat. As we're talking, her young daughter is playing here. My young son is playing. They're just like right there in the mix. And, they're absorbing and they're listening to everything. And her being the fantastic mama and Montessori teacher that she is, so she has a really close dialed in observation of language. She just started talking about all these amazing things you can do as a girl. Like, strong like a girl. amazing like a girl. And she starts listing off all these things. And inside myself, I just felt so embarrassed and so full of shame for having used such a horrible phrase, because it was just unconscious. It was something that was used around me. It was in the culture of my upbringing. I think it was used in like PE classes in school, and I just used it without thinking and was demeaning myself, my friend, her daughter, every other woman. Like, there's so many other ways I could have said that. Like, yeah, I'm struggling with a modified push-up, or, like a knee push-up, or I don't know, anything. But that phrase just came out without thinking. And as soon as my friends started course correcting the impact of it, I just realized, like, oh my God, here I am, a woman raised by an incredibly strong woman who taught me that as a girl, as a woman, you can do anything. Never limit yourself. You're strong, you're powerful, you're smart, you're creative, you're energetic. There's nothing different because you're a girl. So that was the environment I was raised in with my mother. And then here I find myself as an adult professional looking to bring light out and empower other people to see themselves in the best light. And there's this unconscious phrase that's just hanging out that I say.
And so for someone listening who might have heard you when you say girl push-up, and they're like, oh, really? That was the phrase that like really rocked your world? Like, I think there's such importance in our language and the way that our words have an effect on the ecosystem around us.
Right.
So like, what did that really mean to you to have that reflection, and like kind of what were your sort of like beliefs about like yourself and the world and such before that moment? And then how has that affected kind of how you show up since?
So I get that, like, sure, that's a seemingly minor thing, but the thing that was really jarring about it was that for someone focused on empowerment, it had slipped by. And it made me reflect on how impactful our language is and the commonly agreed upon phrases that we can use as a culture. Things that are demeaning to people based on their gender, based on their race, based on their culture, their religion, their ableness. We have a lot of phrases, and I'm going to challenge everyone to think about this. I don't think we need to list them.
Certainly
but
don't.
Sure,
we would be here for the rest of our lives, probably.
Yeah, but I'm sure right now everyone's going like, oh yeah. You can start to think about phrases that seem harmless, but they're actually really pointed, and they belittle people. They make them feel less than. They make them feel excluded. And our language is full of them. And even the most conscious of us probably still has some of that alive inside of ourselves. And so as we move forward and we're looking at creating a world that's more inclusive, that's more supportive, that really does welcome all people into the circle because we're all humans, those little phrases are actually really destructive. And I think that if we challenge ourselves, we can all find places where we're using them and we didn't even realize it.
I would completely agree with that. I think we often undermine the power of our language, and that even in of itself has felt like quite a divisive topic in our world right now. And I love your challenge to say, let's actually take a look at how we are using language to exclude others, even if we don't know that we are, because I think that's kind of a silent killer of
100%
our communities. We talk about connection and how to come together across different beliefs and really build connection, that we might not realize that the way we're talking to someone is like slowly doing this to them. So what have you done since that?
Well, I think it's a process of paying attention. You double down on your consciousness about the words that you use. And, over the last 10 years, have I never said something derogatory or demeaning or, unconsciously? Absolutely not. It's happened. But it's a moment to really start to look and to see like, oh gosh, I didn't even think about how that would land with someone else, or how hard that word might be to hear, or that phrase, how, I have no context for it. It doesn't mean anything to me. But if I think about the origins of that, it's really hurtful and divisive. So I think the change has been to wake up to the language. With NABA, that natural art of being alive, I've had the privilege of working alongside several people that are practitioners of neuro-linguistic programming, which is a whole art form and a therapy in looking at our language. And the phrase that several of them have used is that our words create worlds. And I think that is so powerful. And when I was thinking about having this conversation with you, I thought about their work, that work in that world of really looking at the power of our words. How is it shaping our inner world? How is it influencing the external world around us and shaping the inner worlds of the people that are around us? Because words are so powerful. There's a vibration there that carries a lot of potency and has a huge impact. It can raise someone up. It can create power and positivity and just luminous radiance in someone, or it can absolutely shred them and turn them to dust.
I was listening to some stories, and even this morning, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the conversation had come up, and the woman said, what do you say to yourself every day, or when you do something? Like, what is your dialogue toward yourself like? Are you saying, oh, you are so strong, you are so compassionate, you're so amazing? Or when you make a mistake, are you forgiving to yourself?
Yeah.
Or are you like, oh, you're an idiot, why would you do this? And the power that has in how we even hold ourselves back or how we empower ourselves, I think we kind of undermine as a society. At least in what I've noticed, is we underplay the value of that.
The work that I do in my current role is to support people who are filming courses and bringing their work to the world. And there are a lot of them that create exercises in their course material that's just what you described. Looking at yourself, accepting yourself, directing loving energy toward yourself, repeating phrases out loud or internally. And, as we've kind of followed the thread of this conversation into the heart of it, which is our words are so powerful. Those words don't have to be spoken for them to uplift or flatten. And when we're talking to ourselves internally, if we're speaking harshly and critically and we're demeaning ourselves and we're being derogatory toward ourselves, that influences the way we show up in the world and the words we choose to speak to other people. And we might have filters where, I think most people would say, gosh, I would never speak to someone else the way my inner voice often speaks to me. But in moments when you're stressed, you're tired, your resources are low, that's moments where that has an impact on the external world now. Yeah. Because that language is so ingrained in you internally.
And I've been guilty of that too. When you say that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I have done that.
And when I said, the harmless phrase, girl push up, you better believe my internal dialogue in that moment was full of shame and oh my God, how awful are you? What did you just do? Just ripping into myself. And luckily over the years, that is a process that I've had the privilege of hearing other people have conversations like this, having this type of thing pointed out through meditation teachers, spiritual teachers, that type of work, really pointing to that inner dialogue and working to shift that when I find myself in a situation where I don't show up in the way that I wish I had, that I can correct that inner language a lot faster than I did, a decade ago.
Absolutely. So I have to ask, do you find yourself being a little bit more forgiving with yourself when you kind of slip up, if you do notice?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're so hard on yourself.
The first impulse is to, say something critical, but I can breathe and just have a different conversation. And I think, when I would work with clients, when I speak to people about the healing process, that's what it's about. And this is a healing process, healing our words, the way we speak to each other and the phrases that we use unconsciously. And it's not about getting it perfect. It's not about never making a mistake. It's really about the awareness and the consciousness that you have around what's happening. And when you step off the path, whatever that is, you wake up sooner and sooner. And so instead of finding yourself like way over here before you wake up, as you continue to hone in your skills of just self-awareness and self-love and forgiveness, you realize that you've stepped in a direction that doesn't feel good to you, that's not supportive to yourself or to your communities. You realize that sooner and sooner, and you bring it back. And that's just what it is. You bring it back each time. It's not about perfection all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the importance of awareness. And I think as a world, it's important for us to continue building our own awareness, not only of ourselves, but of everything else that's going on around us, so that we can see what impact we do have.
Right.
And I think it's so illuminating when you start to have that awareness of, I love to do work that is in like a workshop setting or in a coaching setting, to say, like, are you actually behaving in an alignment with your values?
Yeah.
And are you drawing out of that, or are you spending your time reacting to other things that are happening and not really like going back to that and checking in with, is this how I authentically want to show up in the world? Is this aligned with what I believe about myself?
Absolutely.
And sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Right.
But
and then sometimes it'll spark you to go, well, what do I actually believe?
Right.
Like sometimes you think you might know what you believe, but how often do you really sit down internally and process that?
And even like I've spent the last several years with my master's studying values and beliefs and how they impact our behaviors. And there's not agreement in like what comes first as far as like the core of what influences your behaviors. Like there's a lot of using values and beliefs within the same like language, using them synonymously, or like in the 70s, it was like values drive beliefs, which drive this, which drive that, which drive behaviors. And then it's like, no, beliefs are the very core. And it's like, regardless, like you still have something that's in the core, like regardless of what we will or will not agree on, you know, linguistically on what like really is the center. Like there is something that's in the core there that we're acting out of. And I don't think we often like really check in on that.
Yeah.
And identify what is that and are we acting in alignment with it.
Right.
So,
well, it's all an energy, you know, our values, our beliefs, our thoughts, our words, all of it is really coming from an energetic core. So at the heart of who we are and how we show up and how we impact, it's energy. So those thoughts have a vibrational energy that impact the way your body feels, that impacts the way you interact with each other. And then you receive the energy of someone's words, and then that influences your inner world because of that energetic exchange. So when we're focused in on aligning our energy, connecting into the energy of our bodies, then we start to shift things too, and we can really start to clear away some of the blockages, some of the pain, some of the just inauthentic, misaligned courting that we do throughout our life with people, beliefs, and ideas. That's a big part of what I have done in life too with my work is energy. So looking at like all of this really is energy. And so what energy do you want to feel? What energy do you want to share? And what energy do you want to see magnified in the spaces and people around you? And so that's an influence on like how you're going to look at this that I think can take us outside of the like self-critical analysis here is like we're really just looking at energy. So that energy doesn't feel right, and it feels easier to clear that out instead of like, well, that was a shitty thought, and you know, pulling it out that way. And then it kicks up judgment. We're like, oh, that's not an energetic I'm aligned with. Let's move that out of the space, out of my heart, out of my mind, out of my voice.
And it makes me think of something that I've really enjoyed as an analogy is that the way that you see other people around you is really just a mirror back to how you're showing up in the world.
Right.
And once that really clicked for me, I was like, wow.
Right.
It really forces me to check in on every single interaction that I have.
Right. And when judgment flares up, like, oh, what's that about?
Yeah.
Why do I feel so upset about this?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, this ended up evolving into something that I did not expect it would, and I absolutely love it. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. You just never know where those golden threads will lead you.
Nope. I absolutely love it. Just a little trickle off into the yonders of some conversations I love having. So thank you for that.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Check it out. Yeah.
I am so grateful that you have chosen to spend your time with me here on the Nexus of Narratives. I know that time is our most invaluable resource, and I am grateful for your support by just listening. If you would like to further support the podcast and my continued work in this space, please go to www.nexusofnarratives.org. That is NEXUSOFNARRATIVES.org for more content, ways to support, and connect with others. The Nexus of Narratives is a project, a passion project of mine in the Nexus Impact. So if you are looking for coaching services to become the type of leader that others want to follow, or help improve the culture and engagement of your teams, your organizations, and build greater community to help reduce lost costs due to turnover and inefficiency, reach out to me. I would love to help support you in your work. And if that is the avenue that you would like to go, you can find me and connect on my website. That is thenexusimpact.com or THENEXUSIMPACT.com. Thank you.
So to make a shift here. So, going back to your story and some of the related tangents that we had, how can that story create connection for other people who may resonate with what you shared?
Yeah. Well, I think compassion is at the heart of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that compassion is directed inward when you find that you're out of alignment, but also a compassionate approach to others when they are out of alignment, because you too know what it means and feels like to be out of alignment. There's not one of us that has ever lived a life never having been out of alignment. And that's actually, it's when we wake up and realize that we're out of alignment, that's when we have our greatest moments of growth and transformation. And so I think at the core of it is that concept of compassion, and that compassion and the compassionate heart and mind is how we start to heal as a people and find common ground.
I believe compassion is so important.
It really
And
is.
like you said, outward compassion and internal. I don't think we can achieve being compassionate for others without having some compassion for ourselves too.
That's
Like
right.
it feels like that's where it starts.
And I think often we can find one direction is easier. Usually it's outward.
It is so easy for me to be compassionate for every other person.
Right. But you'll find that, at least I have found, that the more I work on my inner compassion, the easier it is for me to find compassion when I'm really triggered by someone's behavior or words. Because there's plenty of things, I think this is also true for all of us, that you can easily be compassionate toward. It just doesn't have a trigger for you, but we all also have certain areas in life, certain concepts or beliefs or words or expressions that come up in other people that's really hard to be compassionate. And that's where, like, to kind of loop back to what we were saying before, when you're doing the work internally and really sitting with your own heart and bringing compassion internal, or bringing that compassion to an internal place, when you're in those places where it's really triggering or you're really low on your resources, that compassionate energy is just so much easier to ride. You don't have to find it and search for it in the depths. So.
It's kind of like exercising any muscle. It's like,
yes, it's funny you say that. I often talk about our energetic muscles. So like you can go to the gym and you can exercise your physical muscles and it gets easier and easier. It's the same with our mental muscle, our energy muscle, our heart energy muscle. The more you practice, the stronger you get, and the easier it is.
And with any skill,
Yeah.
with anything at all. So for someone who can relate to what you've been talking about or even relate to part of your story, what would you say back to your past self?
I think I would actually reflect a celebration to her. Like, aren't you glad you saw that? Aren't you glad that you had this moment and with a safe and compassionate person who didn't flare up in, judgment or anger or irritation or criticism, but who gracefully just sort of said, hey, let's actually look at this instead. And so I think it's a celebration of discovery.
Do you think it would have gone differently if she was like, how dare you?
Absolutely. I think it would have fed the shame and the embarrassment inside of me, and it would have fed the inner critic. And I don't know if I would have had as much positive self-reflection as a result of the experience had I had that shame doubled down, because I already felt it inside.
Yeah.
I didn't need anyone else to help me, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said such a derogatory thing to women, It's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have had a positive outcome, I don't think.
And I think that, I just want to sit with that for a minute, because that feels like such an important lesson. I've heard that in so many different spaces. And to say the answer of creating connection and helping somebody see when they're in misalignment is not necessarily always directly calling them out, leading to conflict, being like, see, you were wrong.
Yeah.
Which I think we're so quick to do because it makes us feel better.
Well,
because then we feel like
conflict
we're right.
just continues to escalate.
And then there's this thing that happens. And it's so important to instead, that compassion was an invitation for you to teach yourself and learn.
Right. And it's always so much more powerful when we come to a conclusion on our own than when it's thrust in our face.
Yeah, because then we get defensive.
Right.
Because we don't like to feel wrong.
As soon as you enter that area, when you're in the arena of defense, you're not learning, you're not compassionate, you're not open. It's a closed place.
Yeah.
So when you can lead by example, by positive example, which is what my friend did.
It's like, I'm just going to redirect you
go,
just like I do a child.
Okay. I was 100% the child in that moment. I was being redirected just like she would redirect her 1-year-old. I was the 1-year-old. And it's a lot, there's a lot of grace in that. A lot of grace.
But I think there's something really powerful about, I think it wouldn't do us justice to not address what happens in our bodies too, when we are faced up against that really hard confrontation. Because, it brings me back to my neuroscience background to be no, even on a biological level, our body is survival. And, here's a threat. I can't differentiate what kind of a threat. My body is under threat. Then all of these different systems are firing. Right. So then that's when you get retaliation, we're in defensive. So then we act out in ways that are not constructive.
Just make it worse. And what I would say from an energetic perspective, when you're in those places, the firing of your nervous system into that fight or flight and defense closes down the energy of your heart. And now compassion isn't accessible. You can't get there because you've shifted out of your heart and into spaces that we don't really want to align with.
And I think there's a reason why this is the gesture that happens with that too, is even blood flow wise in your brain, you start to lose blood flow in the areas that make us human and very different from other animals, that we have the power to have this executive level thinking and this higher level of processing problems, and that our brains that's not important right now. I'm going into survival, which
there's a threat.
This is the exact thing that I picture, even on a blood flow level. It's that's not important. We're
into the core. Yeah. Well, and then all the energetic layers, just barrier around the heart. And think about when that's happening repeatedly in your life, what's happening to your ability to access the compassion that is the natural baseline of the heart. The heart is an organ, a tool of connection and compassion. And when it's armored and it's sunk in, we can't access that. We're not really able to connect with one another and feel compassion for ourselves and other people when we're armored and when we're drawn into that survival instinct.
Yeah, just like layer,
so when
layer,
we
layer,
have defensive reactions to each other, and one wrong word brings out another wrong word, brings out another and another and another and another, which is such a common experience in the world, right? Now we see what's at the heart of a lot of the things that divide us.
Absolutely. I'm not going to say any other words after that. Yes, I love it. So, now, what do you feel like you need to feel connected to the people around you? You know, we're talking about compassion and connection. Like, what do you need?
I think for me, as a person that I do identify as someone who is highly sensitive, I can feel the energy. Well, we all feel the energy of a space. We all do. But I've developed a sense of awareness. So in order to really feel totally open and comfortable and compassionate in my heart, I need to feel that energy in the space. And when I don't, then there's some choices to make. So I can notice that if there's hostility around, then my instinct is to start to pull in and protect. And so that's where it's like, oh, right, no. That's not actually how I want to show up. So if there's hostility, what can I do to keep myself open and in alignment with the things that I do value? And oftentimes we can shift the space. I think it's a mistake to go into a charged circumstance with the idea that I'm going to shift the space. But if you can remain open and rooted in your heart, there's a potential for it to shift, because now there's a different vibration and a different something that people can connect with. So for me, I feel like the other hearts of other people, you know, it's really important, the vibration and the intention and the presence that someone has in their heart. And I think some people are just naturally present. They might not even know. They might not have even really worked on it, but their life has led them in a certain direction where they do have that authentic compassion. So I would encourage everyone to think about, like, who do you know in your life that you just automatically feel relaxed around and you feel like your heart is open with them?
Yeah, I love that.
And ride that vibe, you know, and then notice, who's not safe? And what do I need to do to show up to keep myself safe, but also teach myself to be open and not allow that energy to shut you down, where you no longer have access to your compassionate energy.
It's like a nice invitation to try having that duality on your shoulders of like, here's the person that you feel,
like you just can let down.
I can be anything and it's okay. And then the person that you're like, oh God, I gotta really
watch this,
eggshells,
watch the words, watch the body posture, watch everything. Like that's, and so I think that's an opportunity for us to go into ourselves and really be with, how can I show up authentically no matter what? Even if I think you might not approve.
Yeah. And to have that compassion to be like, all right, well, it's not my fault.
Right.
That they didn't approve that.
Nothing to do with me.
Yeah. It's, usually all of us, we're so focused on what's going on with us. It's less about the other person and all about us. So last but not least is for people who maybe can't relate to what you're saying, maybe had that moment when you said whatever, and they're here, what can they take from your story, from your message, to create some connection with people who have different perceptions and experiences from their own?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think we've said it already. I think it all begins with the relationship we have with ourselves. You know, that's the most precious relationship we'll ever have. And when we can make that right, we have a foundation to begin making things right around us. But when we're triggered, always, I think it's an invitation to go in and explore, like, well, what was that about? What is that about?
Yeah.
And why do I feel so uncomfortable? That's how we grow.
Absolutely.
Being that is the warrior spirit. This is uncomfortable. This is hard. And I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to lean in and I'm going to look and I'm going to try to understand what's happening here.
Yeah.
And the hardest times to do that, I think, is often inside of our own hearts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of often when I have conversations that someone like has that moment and they react, is to not question like what they're saying, is just to, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's like enough.
Yeah.
To get someone to really like reflect back and take that look at themselves, like you had said.
Because it's usually it's a wounding that causes us to react like that. So, okay, well, that's a place to lean into compassion. You know, when there's a wound there that's causing us to have big reactions, and we all have those. The triggers point us to the wounds, and that points us to the work.
Yeah.
You know, and so we have to be, that'll probably trigger you to some people.
I don't have to do anything.
See, we're doing it right now. We're reflecting. We're honing in our words. There's an opportunity to look at the places that we feel uncomfortable and the places where we start to notice that we shut down and ask what's happening there, and just be willing to sit with the darkness that's inside of us, because we all have that. We all have a shadow side. We all have parts of us that are not kind, that are horrible, that are destructive, that are like the things that we are most ashamed of. And if we're willing to sit with that and go, so why? What happened to create you? What happened to magnify you within me? And how can I help?
Beautiful. I love that so much. Wouldn't we all benefit if I did that every day? I feel like that would be a big,
I know. I actually feel inspired. Like, gosh, I haven't really been doing that every day. I should. This is an opportunity, not I should. This is an opportunity for me to look at that, you know, as well as the words come out. Like, oh, that's a great idea.
Great idea, self.
Let's go deeper into that consciously. Consciously.
Like, thank you, self. I'm gonna practice that now.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to like rip it out, like get the hell out of here kind of energy, but like, whew, you seem like that feels like a lot. I often will direct people when we're working one-on-one to like go in and have a conversation with your heart. Talk to your heart like you and I are talking. Close your eyes, go inside, sit with the energy there, sit with the consciousness there, and ask, you know, how are you? What do you need? What messages do you have? And just be willing to sit with that conscious energy no matter what, and listen. And just think about like when you as a whole person, not as a center to your heart consciousness, but when you're struggling and someone says, come and sit. I'm just going to be here. And I'm here to listen. When you're ready to say whatever you need to say, and whatever you need to say is totally fine. You can rage, you can cry, you can laugh, you can express anything. That's so comforting. And we can do that for ourselves, and we can do that for our hearts by just being willing to be with the heart.
And I think we don't spend enough time with ourselves either.
So many distractions.
We're so busy. We love being busy. I'm guilty of it too.
I mean, we have phones and radios and TVs and, you know, like devices all over the place. Yeah. And that's an argument, not an argument. That's an encouragement and inspiration for quiet meditative time. And it doesn't have to look like, you know, meditation on a cushion, but it's just, it's really just about being quiet and being willing to listen and look. Yeah. Because the thoughts that come up when you're quiet are actually really interesting, and you can get a lot of information about yourself that way.
I found it so magical to spend some time free of distractions, and I was told that it's the most illuminating way to see where you are.
It is.
And everything that's going on here and in here gets really loud really fast when you allow yourself to not be distracted by everything else.
Absolutely. You see what you're worried about. You see the judgments you have, the pain and the sorrow that you have. It all comes up. Because, if we think about like contents under pressure, what happens to that? If you think about like a pressure cooker, if it's not released, it blows up. And we're like constantly in danger of having that eruption or explosion if we're not willing to go in and release the pressure a little bit by just sitting there. Like, let's just open the door. Let's open a window and just let some fresh air in, let some light in, give some space.
And I feel like that feels like the crux to me of so many different challenges that we have as humans right now in the world that we're all sharing at this moment. Is I felt as I was growing up as though I needed to don't express it, shove it, don't get too angry, don't get too emotional, don't cry in front of people, don't do this. And it's just like shove, 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 shove. And I know I'm not alone. There's so many of us, and especially like how we treat different people. It's like, don't act like that around here. Don't do this here. Don't do this.
Or the ones who weren't able to keep it all in. And then people are like, oh, God, you're so sensitive. Like, what a mess.
Right. Yeah. And then what happens?
Shame and the
we're like,
judgment
pressure
that comes
cooker,
with that.
pressure cooker, pressure cooker, pressure. And then all of a sudden someone erupts. And then everyone's like, whoa, okay, where'd that come from? Or like someone acts out in violence towards somebody else or harms themselves, gets self-destructive. Like, what if we were just more generous with ourselves and we just gave ourselves those moments to feel and had compassion from people around us? Maybe there would be less explosive destruction from people.
Right. Wow, we really took that
into so many different spaces.
But it made sense to me when we were going on that journey.
Like, well, we just solved all the problems in the world, right? Didn't we?
I mean, really, I feel like, I know that was a joke, but I really do think that the answers are often the most simple. And the hardest things for us to do are the simplest. But they're the most profound. Compassion, generosity, respect. In here.
Yeah.
First.
And it starts with us.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing this turned into. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. What a great way to spend a Friday afternoon.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Oh, I think we've said it all.
We have. Now off to go and use this to make the world a better place.
That's right. Go spread a little compassion, some love, all that. Yeah.
Well, I think I might just play this for myself every day now.
We can just recall this moment in our hearts and feel all those good vibes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A special thank you goes out to Sparta Media Group for producing this podcast ever so fantastically. So thank you to Jesse and his team. And an additional special thank you goes out to my sweet and talented husband, DJ Richardson, for creating the music that is used in this production. Thank you so much, so deeply for spending your time with me here on the Nexus of Narratives. I hope that you found this to be a tremendously valuable use of your time and your capacity, and that this might help you to create greater connection and compassion in the spaces all around you.
Ready.
All right. This is the Nexus of Narratives, and we are chatting with Deanna. Take one. Click.
All right. Let me get situated.